So my task is sort of give a 40,000 feet sort of intro to this topic. And I realized the 40,000 feet is also the elevation that balloons are flying at these days. So I'll be very careful to look down if nothing is being pointed at me. But basically, you know, lots and lots of stuff is happening. It's around generative AI. It's in many ways unprecedented how fast things are changing. And it will be, and to some extent is already, but primarily will be also unprecedented in terms of how many disruptions in our industry will happen as a result of generative AI. So if you don't take anything out of the rest of the slides, that's a very strong statement, and I very much believe that. So let's move on to a couple of other slides. Here we go. A little bit about myself. So I'm a part of a two-person company. We do two things. One is we organize conferences, one also in October, Visual First. Quite a few of the audience members have attended or will attend. And the other one is we also organize spotlights, which are streamed events primarily for Americans and Europeans to get together and discuss and show and see presentations of topics that are very timely, that cannot wait until our annual in-person conference. This is all being fed by market research. So we follow that whole photo video industry very closely. One result of the research is we have a bi-weekly newsletter. It's free, Visual First Perspectives, and we also produce reports and do in-house workshops. All right, so that's as far as the introduction goes. So before we dive into generative AI specifically, I want to talk, some of you, depending on your age, have gone through all of these motions before when something dramatically is about to change. And I only have 2 slides about this. We can talk about this for hours, but I want to sort of put it in perspective. So for instance, you know, when we went from film to digital cameras, now retroactively say, okay, what was the big deal there? Well, remember, in the past, in order to take a photo, you had to actually think about and carrying a big camera along. That's number one. And you actually had to pay and wait to see, you know, the photos that you were taking with these cameras. That's just unimaginable. And it was also a tremendous change when we went to digital cameras. Similarly, you know, skip a few steps there, but that's how our company started when the first smartphones had sort of decent cameras about 10, 11 years ago. And that changed because you had that camera in your pocket that was always connected as well. So there have been tremendous disruptions in the past in our industry. What is more important is, you know, how do you respond to these disruptions? So you can sort of ignore it and need to be very careful. And there's a lot to be said about Kodak, because they definitely acknowledged what happened with digital cameras. They actually invented the digital camera, but I sort of still ignored it, didn't put their resources into anticipating what that disruption could be, because they were too stuck in their old profitable business. You see other incumbents who have actually adapted and thrived when there were major disruptions happening. Like Fujifilm has done a tremendous job with their Instax, the instant camera brand, to attract teenagers, tweens, and even younger kids who have sort of, because of the way they make their instant cameras and their printing and their marketing, make it really cool again to have tactile photo print products. So you can adapt to a new world and be very proactive there. Leica, unlike some of the other digital camera vendors, have been really, you know, progressive in making their technology available also through smartphones with major partnerships. So some incumbents saw what was happening, saw new changes and disruptions happening, and reacted to that. The other part that happens with major disruptions, there will be new players, very significant new players coming into an ecosystem. For instance, in Insta360, They really innovated the whole world of cameras, initially around 360, but also action cams, etc., light tricks, photo editing, photo enhancement apps, TikTok, and you can expand that list. Major takeaway is disruptions are happening. As an incumbent, you need to be very proactive and see what's happening and adapt, and be aware of the new players that will come to the market. So one question, because we had a prep call yesterday, is generative AI is such a hot topic there. So if a startup is trying to raise money, they call themselves generative AI. So that term is being very loosely used these days. And there's a lot of confusion actually where synthetic media ends and generative AI starts. Synthetic media, to make it very, very simple, it's realistic digital media. It's deep fakes using AI. That's a very simple way of calling that. Generative AI goes a little bit more specific because it creates entire new content. It's not like a transfer style filter kind of change to an image. It creates entire new content. Could be photos, of course, could be text, could be video. So you have a different kind of output, and it's all being done by content type that went into the system. Could be a text prompt, could also be submitting an image, and then it generates multiple images from that. So that's a little bit, to keep in mind when we have the discussion later, what is really generative AI in that regards. And I said earlier, changes are happening very fast, quote unquote, in real time almost. It was only a couple of months ago, everybody got really excited or felt threatened when you saw, pretty sophisticated pieces of art being created through text prompts. In particular, that award that was given, I believe to a Colorado text prompt engineer who created a beautiful piece of art and got an award for that. It moved on very fast in the last couple of months. Photo apps like Lensa, where you submit 10, 15 images of yourself, selfies, or of other people, and that creates then a whole bunch of other AI-generated images based on that mini training set. So it moved there, and that's already being passed now by a phase that people are really start thinking about e-commerce, for instance, or marketing. The ability to create many, many, many images, variations of images, data-driven creation of images that allows you sort of an infinite customization and do that at scale. So instead of having a photo shoot that maybe generates 25 different photo products, settings, you could have hundreds or thousands of that conceptually. So that's where a lot of attention is moving towards now. So that's all happening very, very, very fast. The other one is we had seen some implementations earlier from like Google and Meta, but now Runway was just announced last week. Runway, which is one of the creators of Stable Diffusion, came out with a really impressive implementation of they call it Gen 1 to create generative AI for video. That's starting to become serious now. And of course, all the buzz we had about generative AI is almost completely supplanted in the last, say, 2, 3, 4 weeks at the most. And everybody's talking about ChatGPT. So it's lots of things are happening very, very fast. And as I said earlier, brands are starting to realize the potential to do things at scale, but they're also, concerned, and that will be a topic of conversation that we will have later on. So I won't dive into that. So my last slide, I actually have shown this Gartner slide before, which shows the typical hype cycle, but then for AI in general. And I don't know if you can even see it, but there is generative AI, and this graph came out. in the second part of last year. It was not totally at the top of the hype yet. And I would say we are exactly, really exactly at the top of the hype for generative AI. And the reason why I think we are exactly at the top is, shown this slide before, as I said, just on Monday, TechCrunch, for the first time, was a very strong worded kind of article. Hey, you know what? The hype, the trend has already fizzled. So it's a typical thing when we're going on to the downward cycle of hype. And what they were referring to, and that's, of course, these things are always taken out of concept, are the more sort of gimmicky kind of photo apps where you submit a bunch of photos and then it creates new content of your photos through generative AI. And of course, that is all very cool to do that a couple of times and share it a couple of times. But once you have done that 3-4 times and your friends have received 3 or 4 times different kind of images from you, at some point, that part, of course, fizzles. So we shouldn't jump to a conclusion that there is not a real disruption happening and going to happen along the lines that I described earlier.